welcome. We're very excited that you're all here, courtesy of a pretty profound piece of technology that we're going to talk about. And of course, I'm referring to AC, which is the only reason we can actually survive in this heat right now. Um, but we have a short presentation to share with you. Should I share my slides here? Hopefully that'll pop up. Great, thank you. There it is. So we're delighted to have you here for a brief conversation. I'll tee things up by talking to you guys about our perspectives on what's happening in AI, and in particular our biases towards how we think that the world is changing because of this type of technology. And then my colleague and co-founder Daniel is going to walk through our application, and so hopefully you'll see some of this in action. And of course, as promised, we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to see this live. So anybody that actually wants to try out the system, we're going to do that after the recorded session. And a big hello to all of the folks that are online as well. I know there's a great many of you there, and so we appreciate you guys sharing your time with us as well. So the usual thing, the world is changing, and I was talking to Daniel about this yesterday, and of course, you know that the world is changing. It's always been changing. But let me bring you into a little bit of context. And for that context, I want to show you sort of the foundational technology shifts that we've seen over time. Beginning all the way back with the steam engine and railroads, electricity, combustion engines. And what you'll notice here is AI is just on the cusp of time right now. And what this graph is showing you is the relative increase in productivity and economic growth as a result of these technologies. And we're just on the cusp of realizing what we can actually do with AI. I'll come back to this in a second. This is another pretty famous chart put together by Menlo Ventures, which really starts to highlight the fact that we're now starting to realize and measure these changes, not so much in years or decades or even months. We're now getting to the point of being able to see this impact in weeks. And this theme of time is going to be the thing I'm going to come back to over and over again, because it is going to be the ultimate driver of value change and possibly disruption as we think about what is the role of AI as we go forward. But let me go back to the previous graph for a second. And let me zoom in on one particular aspect of this, which is just to look at a technology that we've seen before. And I was joking about air conditioning. But if you think about something like air conditioning, it's a technology that was enabled by a core foundational technology like electricity. So what happens when we have these big technology shifts is a lot of focus goes on the core technology itself. But the amazing opportunity that we have are all the byproducts, all the industries that we haven't even begun to appreciate or realize yet. And that's the opportunity with AI. It's not just about what we can envision doing with it around efficiencies or automation, or even what the core infrastructure of today's AI is. It's what are all the possible future industries that we haven't even begun to imagine yet. And that's the exciting part of thinking about the future in context of AI. And again, we can learn a lot from the past as well, because this isn't the first time that we've seen AI in action. In fact, I put together a course on AI 5 years ago, which we had to scrap because the industry moved so quickly it stopped making sense. And one of my examples at the time was around the ATM machines. And if you think about what is AI, right? It's a little bit of magic, right? It's that point of not understanding what technology can truly offer as part of what we can do with it. And so the first ATMs launched September 2nd, 1969. And what I always tell people is, imagine it was August 2nd, 1969, and somebody said, hey, did you know you can walk down the street and pull money from a wall? You're like, what are you talking about? You got to go to a bank, you got to talk to a person, they got to validate things. There's a pen involved. You got to sign something. How could you possibly just pull money out of a wall? That sounds crazy. The thing with these types of technologies is once we see them and appreciate them and they embed them as part of our daily lives, we don't view them as being AI anymore. We don't view them as being artificial intelligence. We just view them as being technology. But the bit of concern that a lot of people have is around, well, what happened to all those jobs? Right? There's a lot of focus right now on thinking about jobs and where do we go with these? Well, good news is, historically, we've been very, very resilient as a species. We found things to do with people that can actually create higher value outcomes, even in the same industries. And so the opportunity that we have is actually to continuously think about how can we shift towards more efficiency and higher value versus just thinking about becoming obsolete. Speaking of obsolescence, if you were to think about a conversation that you might have had 5 years ago, and you said, well, what is AI going to disrupt? Before you all started using ChatGPT, you would have definitely said, oh, it's going to disrupt the labor market. We're going to have robots and we're not going to have farmers anymore. We're going to have robots, we're not going to have bus drivers anymore, right? That would have been the thinking. If you ask somebody today, well, they're going to tell you it's going to eliminate all the white collar workers, right? It's a shift of literally 2 to 3 years. But the technology has fundamentally moved everything. And they're like, oh, I should become a bricklayer because that's a job that's going to be secure, right? And I shouldn't be a computer scientist anymore because that's going to die. And it's this kind of thinking which is interesting. But the real combination of the two is actually what we're after. So what if instead of the robot kicking your ass, it was actually dancing with you? What if you could actually collaborate with a robot? What if you could actually collaborate with the machine to create things? And that's exactly what we wanted to focus on. So as we think about what we can create with technology and how we think about AI, one of the things that we can observe, again, from the past and all those different foundational technologies that we've seen, is this idea of compression. Can we take something that used to be expensive and make it orders of magnitude more accessible, cheaper, faster, better? So if you think about the railroad, it made distance obsolete. If you think about mass production, it started to make labor obsolete. Started to compress the amount of value that we put on there. The internet makes information obsolete. And the part that I think is scary for a lot of people now is, what does AI make obsolete? What is AI actually compressing? And I think it's time. If we think about our current version of AI as compressing time, we start to then think about things slightly differently. So if time collapses, then we need to start to reimagine how we analyze things, how we launch new ventures, how we create, how we design, how we demonstrate things, how we understand things, how we share things, how we validate things. And most importantly, and I think this is the part that makes everybody nervous, is how we decide things. Because when time collapses, now we're forced to make decisions faster than we've been comfortable with. We're comfortable with going faster when it comes to distance. We're comfortable with understanding that we can produce more with the same number of people. I think the element of time has always been one of those foundational things that everybody appreciates, everybody values, and everybody knows how precious it is the older you get. But we haven't come to terms with how do we deal with it in terms of the way that we actually engage with the world in context of business. And so decisions is the bottleneck that we started to realize actually occurs in businesses all the time. We've seen huge advancements over the past 2 years when it comes to the applications of technology in terms of making the product lifecycle faster. Building things, demoing things, launching things, releasing things, designing things. Sure, it's getting faster and faster today, now more than ever. Yet we're still stuck with the same business model. And I don't mean business model in terms of how you sell things. I mean business model in terms of how you operate a business when it comes to making decisions, planning cycles, assessments, validations, getting comfortable, dealing with the politics. And all of these have to do with strategic decision making, which has been largely stagnant. And what AI is going to do, unfortunately, is going to amplify this as an issue. Because now it's not just about the flood of ideas that you already had, it's the flood of ideas that are going to be coming and being generated by AI. But more importantly, even if we don't even worry about that, we have a client that was interested in getting into space because it's a frontier market and everybody's interested about it. The problem is, space is not one market. It is a market of domains and subdomains and subcategories and sub-projects and sub-businesses. And this is a tiny fraction of how you can even think about it. The actual space industry wouldn't even fit in this room if we were to actually map it all out. So if we zoom in even further, we start to get to the core of the issue, which is we want to get into this industry, but how? Which path do we take? And if we take that path, how do we execute it? Because it's a space that's entirely new for us, no pun intended. And so what typically happens is you select something based on your gut, right? Based on some senior person saying, hey, I think we should do this. You hire a bunch of consultants, and then you execute, largely through trial and error. And this is how we've done things for as long as we can remember. But what if we could do it differently? What if instead of guesswork, we could start to model initiatives? What if we could actually start to create representations of what those initiatives and those businesses could look like across space and time? And then use that as a mechanism by which we can not only choose which one of these we should do, but also to guide us in terms of exactly how do we execute that to get to that point of success. So the idea of compressing time means we can explore more things with the same amount of resources, hopefully to reach better outcomes. And that's exactly the premise that we thought of when we started INNOVERA, which is how can we actually enable organizations to take advantage of the immense opportunity that AI presents to us, but to build a system that enables them to grow. And underlying this, which is what Daniel is going to show you, is what we've built, which is a business simulation engine. So in order for us to be able to explore all these different pathways, we've actually used AI to deal with AI. So we've used AI, we've created a harness structure, which allows us to create a simulation engine. And I'll describe to you a little bit about some of the math and some of the context behind this. But we fundamentally believe that if you have the opportunity to analyze, to assess, to understand the risk of how you deal with new initiatives, you can ultimately drive new and important innovations and new creations and new business opportunities. Everything that we do is AI native, but we fundamentally believe in this collaboration between humans and robots. So it's AI native, but everything that we put in front of our clients is human validated. Because ultimately, the long tail of innovation still resides within the context of humans. I'll come back and I'll share with you a little bit more of the structure of how we think about this and sort of what we plan on doing in the future in context of AI. But what I'd like to do is hand it over to Daniel now. We'll actually show you a little bit of how this works so that it's not just about PowerPoints.
You said it's not just about PowerPoints because I'm about to start with a PowerPoint. We just got stuck in PowerPoint somehow, and this whole thinking about business for decades now has become a common language. So, kind of helping us ground everything that Pedram just talked about in a particular case example, I would like to walk with you through a pretty common, at least it's common for us because we deal with these pretty much every week of our lives, work lives, strategic situation. And a lot of you in this room have been in some sort of strategic management decision-making environments where you have to make decisions in millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And you have to make them with a certain speed and certain confidence. So we have decided for the purposes of this little workshop to walk you through an imagined situation, but with a real company and a very real market. And as we were debating which market should we choose, so everyone, because there's so many different people in the room, and on Zoom, there's about 50 different people. We decided to pick something that all of you, I'm sure, have tried at some point, or I'm sure if you haven't, your kids have, and those are vitamin gummies. As silly as it may sound, it's a huge industry, and which is not silly at all, to companies like Reckitt Group. Now, Reckitt Group is a real company. It's out of UK. We never worked with them. This is your example. They do health, hygiene, and nutrition. And they have about $20 billion of revenue, quite sizable. And you probably tried their products. It's Mucinex, it's Airborne, Lysol, and a bunch of other stuff you see on the shelf of your CVS or your Walgreens. And we said, well, what if the board of this company, inspired by recent acquisitions in the industry, there have been some big acquisitions by Unilever. Olive got acquired in 2019, 2024, 25 Grooms got acquired by Unilever again, and some other ones. It said, hey, this vitamin gummy market is a real thing now. It's like, there's some signals. We should probably look into this and do something about it. And maybe we should do a quick move. So they would call someone in, head of strategy, head of new business development, and say, hey, let's explore this. And that someone sometimes happens to be you. Well, I've been in those situations before with a number of clients. And they say, hey, let's look at this opportunity to launch potentially a $1 billion product category in the US market. And we need a recommendation from you in 8 weeks. Let's build a case around it. Now, easy to say, extremely difficult to do. Because as you start thinking about this with you and your team, if you have a sizable team, hopefully, maybe not, you need to look at things like customer segments. There's probably 4 or 5 to go into. Then you got to pick a business model that's optimal. Then you have to look at the channel that would be, or a combination of channels. And then you have to look at product options and configurations and packaging. That's good stuff. And supply chain and operations questions. And of course, unit economics and financials. And finally, regulations and many other things, hundreds of things, which you need to take into consideration. And you're at the center of this web trying to piece it all together in 8 weeks. But it doesn't end at 8 weeks. It just starts at 8 weeks. Because if they say go, you got to keep working on it now. So all of this, and you say, thank God I got my friend Claude or my agent friend or some LLM friend now. I can research quickly and analyze quickly. And that's great. Actually, that's wonderful. Here is an issue. All of this is interrelated. All of these are related to each other. Because if I change my customer segment, guess what? Might be different channel now. Might be different business model. These customers prefer subscription. These customers buy over the counter. They go to retailers. And 5,000 other things immediately change. So interrelation is impossible to do when you're doing one piece at a time. You have to build a system that actually understands interrelation. Those are simulation systems, systems that are built on things that are dependent on each other and trace dependencies and actually propagate dependencies. There's other issue, which this has to be nuanced to your company. Because the way Reckitt does business is very different from the way Unilever does business. And the way very different from the way P&G does business. And there's some similarities and differences and nuances and things they flag, strategic decisions they make, capabilities they have. So all of that is different. And then there's some similarities. So you need something that's nuanced that will actually make this very relevant to your particular company. And finally, you need something that can evolve. because we all know that at 8 weeks, whatever it's a yes or no decision, conversation usually doesn't stop there. There's usually 5 dozen questions, follow-ups, and things you have to take care of at that point. So it just continues on. At the same time, your board or whoever's asking you to look into this doesn't want any of this complexity. They don't want to know anything about this. Here's what they want to know. They want a point of view from you. They want a story with a context of why that point of view exists, and they want some reason. So basically, okay, what is the opportunities, risks, and what do you strategically recommend? Give me some kind of a logic, how you arrived at this, and what's the story here. And show me that this is not just some things you hallucinated with a couple of LLMs overnight, and that this is not just, that this is actually grounded in some real intelligence, business intelligence, right? So, great. That's where we start. Switch. Share an INNOVERA instance with you. This is small font, so I'll be reading up the screen. If some of you want to slide forward, you're more than welcome to read what's going on. Yeah. But this morning I asked one of my colleagues to literally take that case and build us out a digital simulation, digital twin of that initiative. But before we jump into looking at that, one thing I want to do is actually throw a curveball, which happens at these board meetings all the time. Someone at the board says, you know what? Thank you for presenting this wonderful case to me. US market looks whatever it looks, right? Good, like that. But that's a big whale to hunt. That this is the big whale to go after. Maybe we should test somewhere safer. Maybe like similar that could be representative of the US market to a certain extent, but just a smaller, safer bet where we can test this and then go after the US market, because that's where we're going to spend $100 million to go into the market. We can't afford a big failure. And you say, oh, that's great. Well, I just spent all this time doing the US case. Now you want me to do some other case, right? So with INNOVERA, we would say, well, hey, let's try that. Let's just build something that would be able to give us an assessment of a different market. So maybe we should ask the room, for the purposes of a simulation exercise, for a suggestion. Market that could be somewhat similar representative, but certainly not as big of a bet as the US market. Suggestions, please?
UK, Mexico.
UK, Mexico, Canada. I heard 2 Canadas.
I like Canada. It's cooler there.
Who's I don't know if it's cool or not. Pedro was from Canada. We could do Canada. We'll honor Pedro. So, okay, should, and we will go ahead and say, should, okay, enter the vitamin gummy market. That's my strategic decision right there. So what are we looking at here anyway? What is this thing? Like what am I beginning to interact with? This is Agent Sherpa. This is the first agent. This is a multi-agentic system. This is the first agent that greets you, that you would start interacting with. Well, first you start interacting with us in our forward deployed advisors, but this is what actually happens inside the system. So basically, there's one reason it was designed, is to help you properly frame your strategic decision. Because the reason, and it's already began framing, thank you, Sherpa, but so the reason that we need this is because whatever you put in is what you get out. So if you cannot frame your own decision, then you'll be in trouble. But Sherpa is very inquisitive, so it will start asking me a lot of business questions, which a good consultant should ask. And having spent the years at DCG, I know what those are. So it says, is Canada the actual end decision, or is it a test case for a broader vitamin gummy strategy. So I don't know. Say yes, Canada is actually a decision.
How you started? You started saying this is a test for the rest of the world.
Okay, well, fine. Let's do a test for the rest of the world. That's up to you.
Because you wanted to do US later, though.
Yeah, fine. We can do that. Yes, this is a test case to see if we can succeed in a smaller country before entering US. Is that right? Okay. So you would notice that on the left-hand side we have what we call frame here, case frame. It basically, and it's updating as we speak, it talks about decision, talks about the context of the decision, what were actually key questions we need to ask. In the meantime, Sherpa is asking me more questions. Okay, so thank you. Now we got more questions I need to answer. And I want to spend a lot of time answering these, honestly. We'll probably answer one or two more and then just launch it. But proving consumer demand, building capabilities, validating brand positioning, generating near-term revenue. I'm just going to say this last time, generating near-term revenue.
That's why no competition.
No.
Can we beat the competition? We beat competitors.
Yeah, I already said generate near-term revenue. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I just want money, Spencer. So
I guess in order to generate revenue, you have to beat the competition.
I think it's, yeah. So going through the success criteria, assumptions, constraints, we are constrained geographically to Canada, stakeholder background. This is one of the frames. Okay, and now finally, near-term revenue that would make Canada launch successful Reckitt size. I'm going to just shortcut. I'm cheating a little bit here because this would usually take me 40 minutes to an hour to properly go through this whole thing. So I gave it a bunch of information ahead of time, but I'm going to tell this thing to just take the success criteria from Vault document and use them. So basically, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to give it as much context as possible. And you can give it any documents and any files that you want, including even web links. You could upload web links, whatever you feel is relevant. And it will use that and it'll interview you. And usually very dogmatically, sometimes it could go for like a couple of hours if you let it. But for those purposes, we also have that launch analysis button, which kind of helps us shortcut to, okay, well, let's just build something at that point. I feel like it's good enough. So I think this frame is good enough at this point, although, you know, the more you give it, better it would be. And the success criteria are there. So let's launch analysis. And I think, yeah, your covered essentials, that's enough. I have option keep editing, no, but we will launch analysis. So what's going on here? I've started generating a mini digital model. Unlike a full model, which I'll show you in a second, this is limited to what we call opportunity validation. So we're exploring three fundamental things. Who's our customer? What is their demand? Is the timing right? What does that look like? So everything about customer validation. What does the market look like? Is it sizable enough? What are the opportunities? What's the regulations and the blockers? And of course, the competitor analysis and wide gaps. And do we have a right to play? And where do we play if we have a right? We intentionally shortcut it here because it will take me about an hour plus to generate the entire thing, the first version of the digital twin. So we'll make it minimum. While it's spinning its wheels and it's doing its thing, let me go back and show you. So remember we talked about what the board wants to see when you go to them, right? So this is a full case. And you can tell that it's full because it has a bunch more stuff here. It's not just the three things we just talked about. It has go-to-market, revenue models, unit economics, finance operations, human execution, legal IP. And we can on-demand add anything else here. This is expandable. This is kind of more like a standard version. There could be more. And what you got on the front page is pretty much a recommendation that you can consume in 3 to 4 minutes. So, okay, should Reckitt do it? No, we shouldn't do it. Because it must first validate formulation stability, consumer willingness to pay, and viable direct-to-consumer acquisition. The aggressive expectation on revenue year 3 is 300 million. Your realistic expectation should be 150 to 267. That is the result of the analysis. Then we gave it some success criteria. Remember, we talked about success criteria, which it should check. So it seems like here we passed on market size, structural white space was validated. There is a GLP-1, that's people that take Ozempic and such drugs that need additional nutrition. It's a defensible high demand product configuration that we direct competition with Unilever, consolidated general wellness portfolio. And the right to win is confirmed by at least 2 durable vectors. So that's, we're compliant on regulatory side, and we already sell in tier 1 pharmacy retails. It's great. That's what's good. What is the problem? Well, the main problem is a lot of these things sell direct to consumer through subscription. We have no ability to do that as Reckitt. Reckitt is a great retail player. It's friends with Walgreens and CVS's. And also, we have some additional issues around achieving our targets, and do we need to confirm demand at the premium tier, etc. And then there's some key insights, which I need to know immediately. So this is where our right to win relies on compliance and distribution. That's what we're strong in. This is where our severe disadvantages, and differentiation requires clinical efficacy, no sugar. Interesting about the no sugar part. I'm kind of curious about why that is. If anyone knows anything about gummies, I'm curious about why no sugar gummies are the differentiator. But we could probably figure that out. But before we do, we should probably justify why we thought that. And for that, we can basically whip up a presentation in just a couple of clicks. This one's pre-built, but we can adjust it and third. So these are auto-built presentations that are built on basis of the analysis and tweaked in real time as the analysis updates and changes, right? So this is basically your storyline where you're talking about, okay, recommendation no-go, blocking gaps, key to risks, mitigations, 5 key questions we want answered, including what Reckitt must do to move forward. And then we can keep going. This is many slide presentation about what strategically we should be doing and thinking about, right? This is why the GLP that we talked about in the previous dashboard is defensible, etc., etc. So long story short, at this point, you've got storylines that you can generate, but you need something that you can generate them on top of. You can't just whip up stuff out of good agents and just trust it. That's why if you actually look at what's being generated, it is a lot of depth of analysis. By the way, we have rarely clients that read the entire analysis, but it is there and is extensively framed. We're using more than 250 frameworks, a lot of them developed at Stanford, actually, and some other top universities, to think about these cases. And by the way, we can take any custom framework and build it in depending on how our client's company thinks. So problem definition and root cause, you're beginning to think about how people think about this problem. Demand evidence and validation signals, right? Where's the demand evidence? By the way, all the links and everything else, research is there. We can talk about timing, alternatives, and adoption friction. Pain points, what people run into, etc., etc., and it just keeps going. And at the very end, what you would always have is your risks, your next steps concretely with the client, what you should do, run landing page conversion tests for direct acquisition. commission formulation stability audit, conduct retail bar concept pitches, analyze GLP search volume trends, etc. Principal claims, and all of the research that went into composing this, internal or external, depending on how we did it. But let's look at another piece, which is more number oriented. And this is revenue chapter I'm clicking on. So we would be looking at, let's see, yeah, like this is a good one. So this is pricing tiers and anchors. You're looking at different streams and segments and price points. The market anchor, which we're looking at, gross margin expected, delta diagnosis, structural versus operational, and whether the estimate is aggressive or conservative, right? We would be, skip back. So we would be looking at the gross margins that we can expect from some of the benchmarks, price elasticity, geography, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of this is actually detailed research that is done by layers of agents. There are research agents which go out and collect information. There's analysts that actually compile it and structure it. There's actually a principal that then picks the right one, and then there's a partner that actually puts it into a narrative. So we have 4-layered structure, which actually basically bit by bit pieces this together. In fact, when we were building it, what I realized is we actually, in a way, imitated a consulting team, the way it works in real life, right? Because that's the tiered structure which they work on, except now it's all down here, and it's hundreds of little entities interacting and structuring this, so it becomes consumable. Now, is this consumable? Well, you can work with it. I mean, I can ask, what was that question I wanted to ask Pedram? It was something about, this is a strange thing that caught my eye. Sugar. Yeah, that was the sugar. Why is it no sugar? Okay. I can, of course, go and just ask, okay, why is having no sugar in gummies so critical for our product? I don't know. Is it? Okay, well, let's see what it says. Here's what's happening. This is not LLM just spitball. This is highly controlled because at this point I have about 300 pages of analysis behind this, which is highly structured, plus links which it used for analysis and documents it used for analysis. So it's not random, and it's controlled by a knowledge graph. So all of that is now being basically looked at, and then we're drawing a conclusion. So when my boss asks me, when I'm in the room with him and he says, or she says, hey, well, but why this? I have a companion, but companion that's not randomly throwing me stuff, that's actually throwing me stuff in a very controlled fashion. So it's needed to meet technical stability, actually, surprisingly enough. So it's not about the customer, at least that's what it says. Efficacy and positioning requirements. Okay, so active ingredient stability. Product must pass 90-day accelerated stability test and keep degradation very slow. I guess sugar hurts that. I never knew that. But those are some of the key things that we would be able to go through the system. Plus, we know exactly where it got that information immediately, at least inside of our system. And then if it used links, it would reference links in that as well. And then we can go into how I can change now any of these, how I can ask it to rebuild me a chapter or a piece of this. But that's less relevant. Let's actually go back and see what's going on here. Oh, okay. Well, remember we did this case for Canada? We launched it a few minutes ago. It's done. It's here. So this is your dashboard. So decline. Canadian market structurally fails the standalone scale requirement. Your expectation is $500 million in SAM. The realistic is much lower. Near-term revenue case is credible. Lacks absolute scale to generate target revenue. Achieving it would require an impossible 70 to 80% market share. Canadian gummy market generated only $244 million in 2023. Okay, but there are good things about it too. Maybe if you had less of an ambition, you could still target the space like GLP, and you have the same width on durable vectors, and regulatory pathway is navigable, right? And then I can go in and I can look at it in depth, like I just did with the previous one, or I could look at my executive summary, which will just give me the highlights and make those highlights very visible or visual, right? or I could go and generate a presentation for my board now on the Canadian market. So kind of stopping there with the visual presentation and switching for a second back to the slides. One thing I want to leave you with today is the following. Every strategy initiative, like 25 years ago, someone gave us a great gift, CAD and BIM for engineering purposes. We could model structures, engineering structures, now visual and test them and simulate them and can build better because of that. We finally have that ability for business strategy. We have now a digital model that we can use to evaluate something. Is this work? Sorry, I realize I'm not showing the screen. Give me 1 second. There we go. So we can use it to evaluate. So should we even pursue this opportunity? Like Canada, we looked at it like, look, it's too small. Like, I mean, unless you want to lower the ambition. Hey, is your ambition now 50 million? Fine, let's go. Then we're good. We can design. What's the best way to get there? We didn't have time to talk about how the simulations for go-to-market work, for product variants work. That's a whole separate other area which INNOVERA works on. And then navigate. How can we stay on course? And if tomorrow someone decides, hey, let's use a different approach or a different market, that goes and gets mapped directly back into the initiative, and we can see immediate changes propagate and what it means for us. It's a whole new way of doing business, and I think it's now becoming possible, and that's what's so exciting for me about what we're building. So I'm going to throw it back to Pedram now, but I hope you enjoyed the little simulation we just ran. Yeah.
You find that you have enough public data to get access to in order for you to develop your models for every imaginable segment or market opportunity that could exist. And certainly there are corner cases where there's no data for you to monitor.
Great question. Yes, and we cover for those corner cases with our services layer, which we have experts in the loop and humans that come in and actually help us figure things out. We had a case where we had to investigate thin film substrate for medical devices, and we had no idea what actually Abbott is doing with their thin film substrate manufacturing. So we had to get someone that was actually an ex-employee a few years ago that knew the market and was able to tell us exactly how it works.
So your business plan has staff behind it with consultants?
There are forward deployed advisors and experts in the loop on demand. Yeah. So there's a services layer on top of the AI layer. It's not the software. It's actually a mix.
That was a great question. Follow-up question to that was, so if it doesn't have information, so then does the system tell you that I don't have the information?
Yeah, we have explicitly what's called low data mode, which tells you, look, we're operating in low data. There's no visible data. We can only make some assumptions here. And do you want to validate these assumptions or do you want to stop?
And further, it'll say, in order to de-risk this, here's the data you need to provide.
Exactly. It will always tell you the next steps. So every piece of the system will always tell you the next steps.
I mean, benchmark this.
Yes.
I mean, it's like there are some already business ideas that they've got taken as certain. So essentially, running against this and see what outcome would happen versus what path was chosen and why. So again, what I'm after is quality of decision support.
We have been benchmarking this from the get-go and continuously improving on those benchmarks. The best benchmark that came just yesterday, we were in a room with one of our US running clients with whom we're doing a pilot, and they gave us very limited data, stuck into like no data. Like there was public data, and they gave us almost no internal data. They do vision machines for chip manufacturing, semiconductor manufacturing. So basically, they gave us no data on what they were actually doing as initiatives, and we simulated what they should be doing. And then they came back and said, actually, we wanted to check, and you actually confirmed the two areas which we should be going after. That's exactly what we're going. We didn't tell you, but we wanted to see if you can actually figure that out, the system could figure that out. So we mostly benchmark with clients now.
So I see that this is very sort of market and business oriented analysis. What if the
the decision is pending on the technology's emergence in the market that you're going. How deep is your model really delve into analyzing the technology and really sort of projecting what that technology emergence might or might not be?
And that's where we need a lot of information, strategic information, not like big data, but like documents from our clients, if they have it on their specific technology, if they already built the technology. Alternatively, and or we also use experts in the loop to come in and say, hey, we're believing that that's the actual evolution, and that's how we're seeing this technology evolve, and that's what we believe. And that's why human in the loop is absolutely critical to ultimate success of the outputs, and that's why we provide it as a service layer.
Yeah, can I say also, so far we haven't found a case that was too technical, but the best way is to try it, right? So if you have a case that has a deep technical aspect, let's talk to Daniel. We'll try it with you and see. We're learning too.
Right. I'm learning how to share my screen again. We'll get there. Okay. So thank you for the questions, and if there's others, I'm more than happy to field those, and we have plenty of time as well. There was one interesting question that was actually popped up online on the Zoom, which was around, is this just another faster horse moment? Is this something where what we're doing is just making consulting faster, better, cheaper? Fundamentally, sure, along the way, you can view it as that. But we actually view this as being an entirely different enabler of capabilities that we actually have not seen before. So, I don't know what this is. Let me see if I can. The key insight, and hopefully you saw some of that come to life as Daniel was sharing this with you, is a good part of our team comes from the world of venture capital. And one of the key things that we often think about is that venture capital, unlike businesses in many cases in terms of the way they make decisions, is not predicated on just the numbers. It's not about the spreadsheets. It's actually about the context. And so our key insight as we were building this system is that the mathematics of how you think about business decision making is not just the numbers. It's actually about the context and the frameworks. And so everything that you see here is brought about by exploring all the different framework scenarios that we can actually envisage. And bringing those together, validated by the human expertise, but more importantly, it's powered by a reasoning graph. And this is a piece of it that we can get into one-on-one and show you guys in depth, because I don't want to sit here and bore everybody talking about a reasoning graph. But in order for you to have a simulation engine, you have to have the ability to think about things like repeatability and structure. And so the graph model that we have underneath every single one of our analyses that you just saw being done here is what gives us the ability to do this type of simulation. And why we're doing this and why this is fundamentally different from just regular consulting is we're fundamentally not focused on business operations. We're focused on growth. We're focused on things that we have not seen before, which is actually very exciting, because if you think about the life cycle of a business initiative going from, is this worth it for us to do? Like, should we get into gummy bears in Canada, developing it, launching it, growing it, and eventually leading into maturity? It goes more or less like this. Now, the one question is
the y-axis for those who don't see it.
Commercial success. Sorry. The shape of commercial success. The one question that I would have is, what fraction of developed business initiatives actually make it to maturity? What do you think the success rate is? 10%. 10%. Low, but at the same time still optimistic. Once we start to actually compound this, it's closer to 2%. And this is not even the ideas. We're talking about thousands of ideas that don't even get to even the light of day of being developed or even brought to any sort of commercial capacity. But from the point where development begins until something reaches commercial maturity, it's about 2%. And so what is that 2%? Every single stage represents risk. This is exactly how venture capital looks at the world. And this risk evolves and changes depending on the stage that you're in. Different things matter. This type of capability is what we want to enable for businesses to be able to look at this type of risk at scale, embedded inside of where the decisions get made. So this is not about outsourcing intelligence from the outside and helping with one initiative and hoping that it's the one that goes over here. But the way that we approach our clients is to say, instead of wishing that you're part of the 2%, what if we can actually structure it such that you are? How can we de-risk these initiatives? How can we actually show you what works and what doesn't work? Business success is not about predicting success. It's about avoiding all the failures along the way. That's fundamentally how venture capital works. Otherwise, you just bet on one company and you'd sit there. Why would you have a portfolio of 80? Well, because you don't know. And that's exactly the thing. We don't know. But can we do this with less time and money, less risk, less personal risk, less career risk? And if we think about why these things fail, it's a combination of demand, execution, and economics. And here are just some high-level statistics. And you'll see they add up more than 100 because sometimes you have multiple modes of failure when it comes to why an initiative fails. And these are fundamentally the risks that we're trying to uncover before they become realized. And in many cases, before you even launch it. Because otherwise, what's the point? If you knowingly are going to go into a situation where there's no market demand, that's career suicide. Forget the time and money at the corporate level. And so when it comes to AI, the way that we think about this is that there are thousands of opportunities to do data mining and to understand how to make existing businesses much more efficient, much more automated, much more optimized. And there are billions of dollars getting invested into doing exactly this. Massive opportunity for AI. But it's a fundamentally different problem when we think about tomorrow. Because no amount of looking into yesterday's data is really going to help us figure out what we should do tomorrow. And going back to Daniel's analogy of the CAD models, every generation we end up with a system where the complexity of the problem that we're trying to solve is above and beyond the human capability to actually understand and come to a realization with it. My background 1,000 years ago was in chip design. It would be foolish to think about designing a chip with pen and paper. The complexity of the system is too great. Same thing today if you think about even redesigning a kitchen, let alone a big 40-story building. It'd be foolish to think about doing that without a CAD system or a CAD model, enabling you to understand what are the risks and how do you actually go about doing it. But that's exactly where business initiatives are flying blind by trial and error. Why? Because it's not just about math. It's about context. In today's AI, we think that we can actually create a situation where in a few years, there's never going to be a situation where you're going to have a business initiative that doesn't have an adjacent digital model helping to guide it, to evaluate it, and to analyze it. And so is this a faster horse moment? Possibly as a starting point, but it's a fundamentally different framework shift of how we think about this as well. So I know there's a lot of folks that are from Europe, which is pushing into 2 o'clock in the morning. So we really do appreciate everybody that's online. And for everybody else that's here, we're more than happy to take any of the initiatives that you have and actually do those live with you if you're curious to see how the system works with Daniel. And myself and Daniel can always be reached as well. And what Zamir is going to do is also leave you with a QR code that you can reach any member of our team. But we're here, we have some drinks, we have some food here, and more than happy to show you what we're doing. Again, appreciate your time and spending the afternoon with us in this scorching heat. We are very grateful that the air conditioning held true and they didn't turn it off on us. And definitely looking forward to staying in touch and sharing more about what we're doing.
There were questions on the chat. Did you want to take them offline or take them now?
I'll take all the, we're going to take every single one of those questions offline. Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you.